Hey, hello, I'm Kråkan, also known as Scarecrow, and welcome to Closet Movie Rambles, where I talk about old movies that I found in my closet while cleaning. This week's movie is Silence of the Lamb. It's a thriller from the 1990s. It's about 1 hour and 53 minutes long, starring Jodie Foster, Anthony Hopkins, and Scott Glenn. It was based on a book of Thomas Harris. Uh, and the movie starts with Jodie Foster's character, Clarice Starling. She's a trainee at the FBI and she's running an obstacle course. And she gets called in to talk to her boss, Jack Crawford. So she gets to his office and she looks around and she sees this bulletin board with a case of there is a guy that skins people alive, nicknamed Buffalo Bill by the media. A little bit later, Jack enters the room, and he tells Clarice to go and visit this psychopath slash ex psychiatrist named Hannibal Lecter, and he's referred to Hannibal the cannibal because he's a psychopath and he basically eats humans. So she rides down to this facility where they keep in sort of an asylum, and she talks to this character, Frederick Shilton, and he's basically the ward or the caretaker of this facility. And there are a couple of rules you must abide when you meet these dangerous psychopath criminals, because there's not just one, there's a lot of them, and it's basically like a cell block down in the basement down the road. You should always keep to the right, and you shouldn't touch the glass, you shouldn't get near the glass, you should not pass any, or Hannibal in this case, person, anything that is blunt or sharp, like pens and paper clips and stuff, because he's so dangerous that he can basically kill with these items. And they tell this story that while they basically explain the rules of this facility to her, that there was an attempted escape in 1981 in July, 8th of July, and that Hannibal basically incapacitated a nurse or something. So he's very dangerous, and they open up the door, and she goes along down the corridor, and there's all these kind of locked up animals, kind of like weird guys down the row. And there's this one guy that he's kind of looking at her funny, and he says this disgusting line, "I can smell your cunt," and she gets very uncomfortable by this, and she moves on down the road. And the caretaker Barney has put down a little chair for her to sit in front of this protective glass cell which Hannibal is behind, and he's just standing there very menacing, just looking at her. And he's very intelligent, he's very smart. He realized that why she's there. She doesn't know this, but her boss Jack Crawford, his agenda is to catch the killer Buffalo Bill. And the connection between Hannibal and Buffalo Bill is that Hannibal basically was Buffalo Bill's psychiatrist, so he knows this character inside and out. But Hannibal is kind of smart, so he realized that he might use this to his advantage, and so But before anything happens, he asked what this guy down the road, Multiple Migs as he's called, what did he say to her? And Clarice kind of embarrassedly said that he said, "I can smell your cunt." And basically, Hannibal, he reaches up. There's like air holes in the glass, and he kind of says like, I myself cannot smell that. And he kind of sniffs, and he tells her like the perfume that she's wearing, or all these kind of stuff that he smells, and that makes her really uncomfortable. You can see her expression that he's very manipulative, and he kind of find out these secret and things about people and use them against them. And he asked her to sit down, and they talk a little bit about things. She asks about the drawings in his cell, and he says that there's the only view I got, basically, because there is no windows. And then she bluntly starts to ask about viewing the case file because of viewing drawings or something. He's like, no, you were doing so fine, and really mocking her. And he looks at the, well, she hands him the report through to basically like this slide door kind of mechanic thing, and he looks at it and he mocks her for just make this assessment that she's a small town girl and she really just fool around with guys in the backseat of cars. He's very blunt and very, very mean. And he hands it back and he says like, no, I won't have a look at this. This is, no. You Clarice, just fly back to school. Fly. Or he says something like that. And he also realized before this scene that she's a trainee just by looking at her ID because it expires within a month or something. So he realized that she's just a puppet of Jack, basically, so they can find some information through Hannibal's past as a psychiatrist. So she takes the file report, case report, and leaves, and she walks to the right. She's not supposed to walk close to the cell block doors with the bars and multiple MIGs. That crazy schizophrenic guy, he throws basically cum at her, and she gets surprised and she gets disgusted by this, and Hannibal kind of, I guess he feels a little sorry for her, and he calls her back to the cell in all this embarrassment, and he tells her like, you that she basically wants promotion, and he can help with that. So he gives her a riddle. Look deep within yourself, Clarice, and know yourself, or you find yourself, or something like that. And the riddle goes on, and she leaves to get some fresh air. So basically the know yourself is a reference. There's a name also. It's the Hester Moffat, and it's like an anagram for some person. So, well, that comes in later anyway. She goes out for fresh air, and she stands by a car, and she's sobbing because of all the terrible things that's happened. And she has a flashback to when she was younger. Her father coming home to coming home from town, I mean, in his car, and he's a police officer, or no, a state marshal, and they meet up and they talk, and she says, did you catch any criminals today, Dad? He's like, no, they got away. And there's like this, this scene kind of established that, you know, she likes and loves her dad. It's all that she has, basically. And she cries and sobs, and she gets back in the car. So Clarice returns to the FBI to do some more training, and while there she gets informed that Multiple Mix is dead and that he was killed by Hannibal Lecter. And Clarice kind of understands this yourself riddle, and she goes by the phone book, and she finds this place in Baltimore where it's basically called Store Yourself Facility, and she finds a register there for Hester Moffat, and she goes there and she talks to the owner, go to this carport, which basically is the storage facility, but it's jammed. It hasn't been open for 10 years or something like that, and she used a car lift from a car to basically bend it up, and she tells the owner, like, if anything happens, just call this number, and my boss or someone will be here to help. And she crawls under the little kind of cat kind of crawl space, and she scrapes her leg, and she starts bleeding. But she gets into this storage facility. She has a little small flashlight, and she looks around, and she moves in a bit. It's very dusty, very, very dark. And then the car jack kind of falls over, and she's trapped in there. She finds a car, which she looks inside, and there's a mannequin that is missing a head, and she finds a preserved severed head in there, and it gets even more. Why is there a severed head in here? She take this back and to the FBI trying to analyze that. She returns to the asylum to confront Hannibal about this, and basically she reaches his cell and it's all dark, and there's no light, but there's a TV in front of his cell with a gospel program playing on it, and she realized on the way that it's an anagram, Hester Moffat. Hester Moffat is basically an anagram for the rest of me, because they just found the head but not the body itself. It's kind of clever. They kind of have this wordplay on it. And she has been out in the rain, so you can't see him in the dark of his cell, but he slides a towel into the slot so she can basically dry her hair and stuff, and he says, your wound has stopped bleeding now, referring to the knee that she scraped earlier. And he's kind of a doctor also, so he kind of knows anatomy, and he's a psychiatrist, so he's really smart. He kind of sees and can read people. And she asks about, we found his head in a jar, who is it? And he explains that it was basically a patient of his called Benjamin Rascal, and he informs her of that, and Clarice, and then the light goes off in the cell, and Hannibal jokingly says, "Thank you, Barney," and Clarice sees that the cell has no drawings in them anymore, and that's basically a punishment. Hannibal tells her that the drawings were taken away because he killed multiple MIGs, because he offended Clarice, who was very rude to her. So, and she also asked, why is there a gospel? Why is there TV? Is that a courtesy? No, that's basically Shilton torturing him. So when Clarice will leave, they will turn the volume all the way up, and he can't leave his cell because he's locked up in there. It's basically torture. And he makes it an offer to her if she can get him out of there, or just reassign him to someplace else away from Dr. Shilton. He basically will help her with the case. So she leaves the case files there for him to investigate, go through. And then Jack and Clarice and one other person, they go to Memphis, Tennessee, Clay County, West Virginia, because they found one of the Buffalo Bills victims has been washed up. There's a dead woman, and they basically investigate the problem. So first of all they go to her funeral, and Jack, which is there, he talks to the sheriff because there's like it's a local murder and the police doesn't really want the FBI to be there. So Jack kind of has to kind of make the sheriff kind of not accept, but kind of he try to argue with him. So, and Clarice goes into the funeral of that one girl that they found outside in the Clay County, and she looks up in the coffin and she has a flashback. No, she looks in through the spring of the door and she has a flashback to her own dad's funeral, and she's basically brought out of that by Jack or someone. And there is supposed to be this autopsy, and they look at the girl and they found they go through all the markings, the missing nails, and all this important detail for later, but missing nails and basically the decay of the body and the cause of death. And I think she got shot in the head at the end, and she was starved for several days. And then they proceed to take photos, and they find a cocoon, a bug in her throat when they're doing some dental work, basically taking photos of the mouth and all that. and then they turn her over on the back, and they see that some part of her skin has been kind of cut off, carved up. Cut off is a better word. And so they kind of, not all of this is clear, but they know that his skins his humps, as they jokingly said, Buffalo Bill, kind of like the Western character, I guess. But they don't really know what he's doing with the skins and human skins and that. Basically, Clarice later take this cocoon and she puts it in a liquid to preserve it, and then she takes it to some bug experts, to find out what kind of bug it is, to proceed and make sense of the case. And so they open up the cocoon at the bug expert's place, and they find out that it's a death head moth, and that they only exist in Asia. So the next scene, they cut to Buffalo Bill in his apartment, his house. You see that he's breeding moths, and there's a loud screaming coming from a well in the house, and he is basically sitting naked and sewing something. We don't really get to see what he's sewing, what he's doing. There's something I forgot about the previous part too. The senator's daughter Catherine was kidnapped by Buffalo Bill. He basically tricked her into a van, and by helping him moving a sofa or something, he pretended to have an injured hand, and so he got her into the truck and beat her unconscious and drove her off and put her in the well. And then at the FBI, Clarice sees this Republican senator, which is Catherine's mother, basically pleading to the kidnapper to let her daughter go. If you talk to her, you know that she's nice. And she's basically telling this because making Catherine not just an object, but make her into a person. It's harder to kill someone off if you know that they're a real person and not objectified. And then Clarice returns to Lecter, and Chilton doesn't like this, the warden. And Clarice offers Hannibal a deal. Basically, she hands him over some papers, and she talks about this place where it has windows and stuff, and he can go for walks, and one time a year he can go outside and swim in the ocean or something like that. There's this island. And then he proceeds to play a game with her. It's basically like, you ask me something, you get an answer, and I'll ask you something, and you give me an answer. And this is basically a mind game. He finds out more about her, so it's more leverage or something. He's a psychopath, so he likes to play games. And he asks her, "What's your worst memory?" And she replies, "The death of my father," because that's the worst thing that happened. She explains why and what happened, everything, that her father and mother basically passed away, and she had to live at her cousin's farmhouse. And it's one of those things. She moved out there, and there was like this the slaughtering of the spring lambs, but she doesn't realize this at first, or she doesn't reveal this to Lecter, but the lambs were screaming at the barn. And then Hannibal gets the answer question about the murder of Buffalo Bill, and it's the victim that they went to the funeral and the autopsy part, and he asked if the girl Francesca, I think, or Frederica or something, if she was roomy or a big woman, and Clarice answered yes. And did she had something down the throat, like a butterfly or something? And Clarice is kind of stunned by this because he hasn't revealed anything. She hasn't revealed anything to him, but he knows these parts. So he kind of explains that a moth or a butterfly, which basically the death moth head moth, it's a significant or change. It's something that is it's a change in process. from something ugly to something beautiful. So what Buffalo Bill really is doing is he wants to be beautiful. He wants to turn out. He thinks that he's transsexual, but he's really not. He's just he wants to. He thinks that he is transsexual, and that's very different. So he has been declined for a gender swap. He wants to be a female because he believes that he will feel better about this. So Lecter explains that he's probably been rejected for all the clinics that he has applied for, and he's basically making himself into a female. And that's kind of like Clarice doesn't understand, and he's trying to puzzle it out. And then he also said he explains about Benjamin Rascal and the character of Buffalo Bill, that they were basically lovers. And in the end, Benjamin was kind of scared of Bill because he finds out that he has been skinning someone, taking the skin of someone. That scared him a bit. And later, Buffalo Bill kills him with a Hester Moffat reference in the head and everything, and the moth. And Clarice reveals that inside the head of Benjamin Rascal, they found a similar moth that they found in Frederica's throat. And then it cuts to Buffalo Bill, and he's talking to the girl in the well, and he's lowering down this lamp in a basket which has lotions in it, and he's holding his dog, which is called Precious, a white little poodle. I think this scene is kind of funny because he's loving and caring about this dog, but not the victim, because he doesn't like to refer to them as like people. So he says, "It rubs the lotion on its skin." And Catherine in the well down there, she says, "Please, sir, I'll do anything you want, but please let me go," and all that. And he says, "It rubs the lotion on his skin, or else he gets the hose again. Isn't that right, Precious?" And he holds up the little dog, and it barks. And she kind of rubs herself with the lotion all over her body, and then puts the lotion back in the basket, and she cries some more. And when the basket is lowered up by the light of the basket, by the lamp basket or whatever, she sees that there are claw marks on the well, on the side of it. So basically there have been people there before, other girls that tried to escape, and there's the broken nail reference, that broke the nails trying to climb up the well, and there's blood and nails and all that kind of stuff. She freaks out about this. And then there is the transfer of Hannibal Lecter, because that was the deal. And so Chilton, he is not happy about this deal about Hannibal Lecter being transferred, because it's above his head, because the FBI kind of or Clarice kind of forced this deal above the head of her boss, and since this is the FBI and it's beyond his jurisdiction, he can't do anything. He can just sign the papers and have him transferred to the other estate as transferred as it said in the paper. And they put him up on this wheelie kind of thing. He's all strapped up, and he's had this like protective device so he can't bite anyone, and he's strapped up, and he just rolled down this pulley, and he stands him up, and he has to talk to Catherine's mom, the senator, and he explains a little bit about Buffalo Bill, because they really want to find him, and so they can find her daughter, but he's playing games with her too. So he says like, "Did you?" And he asked the senator about this. "Did you breastfeed your daughter? Did you nurse her?" And her bodyguard says, "Excuse me?" "No, of course," she says, "I breastfed her. I'm a good mom and all that." So, and he makes this kind of really uncomfortable, and he talks about basically her nipples kind of harden when the baby's drinking the milk and all this stuff, and the bodyguard says, "You son of a bitch, you're sick and everything." And he says like, time is ticking and all that. So when it's time to take farewell of your daughter or something, where will it tickle your mom? We will tickle you, mom. And it's like, okay, get this. She says, get this thing out of my sight or something. And they're about to drag him away on his little trolley kind of carriage thing. And he says, he rapid fires out these things like the identity of Buffalo Bill. He might have lied, and he says where he might be and all this. And he ends the thing by saying, like, if there's anything more I can come up with, I'll let you know. And then the senator turns and goes back to her plane or her car. And then he says, Senator, one more thing. And then she turns, I love your suit. So even later, Clarice visits Hannibal at his new location in Baltimore, I believe it was. She has his drawings with her. She gets instructed by the officers there that the same kind of rules as before at the asylum. Don't get too close and stay off, and don't hand him anything personal and all that stuff. And Hannibal gets his drawings, and Hannibal explains about Buffalo Bill. And everything is in the case file. He says all the clues you need are there to figure this out. And he explains this. It's not a riddle, but it's basically psychology to him. It's like, what is his nature, and what does he do? What's the first thing you do? And he says, covered, because that's every day. You have to try to hide something. How do you hide something? And the clue here is simplicity, but she doesn't understand. And then it's the same mind game as before at the asylum. Then he asks Claire again about what happened later at that farm with the screaming lambs and all that. And she explains that it was basically a slaughter, and there was this barn where all the sheep or lambs were in, and they were butchering the spring lambs, because that's what you do at a farm like that. And she takes one of the lambs and runs away, but it's too heavy for her, and she gets stopped by a car along the way. And before she can learn the identity, because that's the next question she has. What's the identity? What's Buffalo Bill's real name? And before he can say anything, Dr. Shilton intervenes, and she gets taken away. And Hannibal says, Clarice, you forgot your case file. And this is a different cage than the asylum cage. This is basically like a bird cage. In the middle of a room, it's like this oval kind of cage with steel bars. And she rushes back to get the case file, and Hannibal touches her hand, and he says, her finger, and he says, goodbye, Clarice. And then she gets taken away from there. And a little bit later, Hannibal is asked for a second serving of food. And the guards kind of argue among themselves that he's a sick bastard. Yeah, he ordered a lamb chop, extra raw. And there is this procedure thing. Then they ask him if he's ready, and Hannibal says, just a minute. And he has this paper clip, or I think it came from the case file. So he takes it out of his mouth, because that's where he was hiding it, and he puts it in the palm of his hand. And he gets handcuffed to the bars of the cage, and the guard comes in, and he's supposed to serve him food. And he says, "Ready when you are, Sergeant Pembry." And he's supposed to put down, the sergeant is supposed to put down the tray, and he says, "Mind the drawings." He's buying an extra time to kind of lockpick the handcuffs. And the officer Pembry removes the drawings he put down to the food, and when he reaches up again, he gets handcuffed to the cage bars. And the other officer that went into the cage, he gets pepper sprayed by his own pepper spray. And Hannibal proceeds to beat Sergeant Pembry with his own baton. And and it's a very graphical scene because you can see the blood and everything on Hannibal's shirt as he just pounds down this poor sergeant. And Hannibal picks up a pocket knife, and then because he's a brilliant mind, he distracts the guards with a gunshot, and the elevator starts moving, and they kind of need to investigate the situation. So they go up to the floor that Hannibal is at, and they find out that one of the guards, either Pembry or the other one, I think it is the other one, his belly has been cut up and is hanging from the bird cage. Every intestine has fallen out, and on the floor is assumably the unconscious Pembry. And they secure the area, and they ask for an ambulance to remove Pembry from the place. They take it. An ambulance arrives, and they pursue the injured Pembry down to the elevator, and he pretends to have a seizure, and he gets taken out. But in fact, it's Lecter has taken Pembry's face and just cut it off and put it on its own so he can deceive them. And while they're riding the elevator down to the main floor, they realize there's some blood dripping from the roof of the elevator through the maintenance hatch. So they get Hannibal in disguise out to the ambulance, and it drives away, and they open up the hatch and reveals this presumable character that is Hannibal, but it isn't. It's just Pembry dressed up in Hannibal's clothes. So he basically fooled them all, and later in the ambulance they realize that we got the wrong guy, and he kills them all basically. And they cut to Clarice trying to figure out the whole riddle about Simplicity, and her co-worker, another girl or woman I should say, is helping her trying to figure this riddle out. And she asks Clarice, aren't you afraid or something that he will follow you up? No, he will consider that rude, because he's somehow a gentleman, and he kind of respects her because he realized that she's kind of intelligent and all that. And Hannibal the cannibal he has left a note or some clue in the notes of the case file, and it's kind of this cryptic thing, and isn't it just desperately random or something? And she thinks about what he said about Simplicity. What do we do? We covered, and what does he do? What is his nature and all that? And she figures out that all these kind of clues goes together with the first victim, and they realize that because she was heavier, and they kind of estimated that there's a lot of more victims that they found in the rivers, and because the first victim, Frederica or something, she was heavier girl, so she's not been taken as far as the others. So she realized, okay, maybe it's closer than we think. So she goes to visit the first family again to get some clues of that. And she goes into her room. She goes to Belvedere, Ohio, the first victim's house, and she looks through the girl's room again, and she finds this music box with half-naked pictures of Frederica, I guess, and she finds out that her hobbies are kind of like sewing, because that was her life, and she kind of makes the connection. But she also goes to downtown to talk to some of her friends, I guess, or someone who was associated with her, and asked did she have any boyfriends, or was seeing any male any kind of men, and she mentions the names of previous characters and other pseudonyms that Buffalo Bill has, but she said no, but just this one thing, there's this old woman named Miss Lipman she may point you out for something because she just go there. And then we find out that Buffalo Bill cutting to him, and that he's making a human suit basically from all the parts of these girls basically. And Catherine, which is down the well, she tricks the little dog Precious into grabbing a bone, and just proceeds to drag the dog down the well to kind of bait Buffalo Bill out. And then we cut to Jack's character, and he gets a phone call from Clarice saying that basically he's making a human suit, and all these things that she's found out. But don't worry, Clarice, we found him. We are at the address, and good work and everything, but basically we don't need you anymore. So Clarice is going to Mrs. Lippman's house to check out this person, maybe find some clues or something. And Jack thinks he's at the right house, so he rings the door, but it's the wrong house, and they storm it in. There's no one there, and Jack realizes that Clarice is at Buffalo Bill's house, and she's by herself. And Clarice doesn't really know that it's Buffalo Bill. She just thinks that it's Mr. Lippman, the contact of the first victim. So she gets in there, and Buffalo Bill lets her in, and she kind of figures out that it's him. She just asks these questions, and she looks to the side, and she sees these sewing kits, like needles and lines and stuff, and she sees a moth, the similar one to they found in that cocoon earlier in the movie. And she says freeze, and she pulls up the gun, and Buffalo Bill kind of loses all his calling cards because he's supposed to trick her. And he runs down the basement, and he grabs his magnum gun basically. And Clarice goes down to the basement, follows, and she finds Catherine in the well, and but she's searching through to find and neutralize or possibly apprehend Buffalo Bill. But Buffalo Bill cuts the power, and then in one of the early scenes when he was spying on Catherine, when he took her into her van, he used a pair of night vision goggles, and he uses them again to see in the dark. So Clarice is more or less, she's going through these rooms and try to find her way, and she can't see, and it's all dark, and Buffalo Bill is just in close proximity and just toying with her. And she's kind of scared, she's falling over, and he's just right behind her, and he takes up his revolver, and he cocks the gun backwards, like, he slide it back because it's a magnum, and it clicks, and she realized that he's behind him. She realized that he is behind him. She turns around and just shoots him, and she shoots him a couple of times, and the window bursts open, and the light comes in, and he's just gargling on his own blood, and he dies basically. And that ends that part. And later we are at the ceremony where she's congratulated that she's basically become an agent, because this is a big thing. She apprehended the Buffalo Bill, the skin carving killer. She gets congrats by Jack, and she also finds out that Hannibal Lecter has escaped, and that he escaped. They found the ambulance near the airport, and they also found that he had murdered another tourists and taken his clothes, and he's off somewhere on a plane somewhere. They don't know where. And Clarice someone informs Clarice that someone is calling her. There's a phone call waiting for you, and she picks up the phone, and it's Hannibal Lecter on the other line. And he congrats her for becoming advancing and becoming a FBI operative, because that's advancement, that's what she wanted basically. And he said, don't bother to trace this call because you won't have time for that or whatever. and she tries to ask him a couple of questions and whatnot. And he says, "I can't talk right now because I have a friend for dinner." And it's a kind of pun, play on words, because he's a cannibal. I have a friend for dinner. So he hangs up the phone and he follows out in a large people of crowds. He's following Dr. Chilton, his nemesis or whatnot. And he's just following him, and it pans out. You see the whole crowd, and he kind of disappears in the crowd. And it's kind of a scary but an interesting take on it all. There's always this, with me at least, this fascinating part about psychopaths. Like, you're always interested in how they think and how they react, because they don't feel emotions and they don't really act like normal humans will. And I think that Anthony Hopkins is doing a really good job with that, because I think in the early 19s there was a wave of psychology and how people think and all these interesting things. And can I recommend this movie to anyone? Absolutely, it's a really good movie. It's not that long. It's below the 2-hour mark, and good acting. Kind of one of those thrillers, kind of slow build-ups, makes you think a little bit. All these clues and everything. It's good writing, and I believe that Thomas Harris, I think it was his name, the author of the book, I think he did a really good job. And it's always hard to translate a book into a film and make it good, because there's a lot of things that can't fit into the movie, because a book is longer than a movie, and you have to cut out a lot of stuff. But I think it was a really good movie. Yeah. So I don't know, I like this. I can recommend it. So I hope you like this, and hope to see you in the next one. Take care.